Hello and welcome to Take Refuge 3D with me, Peter. Welcome back, and if you're new here then just welcome. And in this tutorial we'll be covering taking this 3D brick from Super Mario Brothers that's been made in Plasticity into Blender and getting a really nice texture on it and a nice render of it. So we'll be turning this hopefully into something like this. Now this is the second part of a two-part series in collaboration with Matt from the channel Learn Everything About Design, and if you came here from there then a very big welcome. Feel free to like, subscribe and hit the bell notification. But if you haven't come here from there, head over to Matt's channel, Learn Everything About Design, and learn how to model this brick in Plasticity. Matt is a fantastic teacher and he does content on Plasticity, Fusion 360, 3D printing and much more. Now, for this tutorial we're going to be using Blender 4.3, which is a free and open source 3D software, and a download link for that's in the description. Now Blender can look overwhelming at first and it can do a lot. So it does modeling, sculpting, you can do texturing, rendering, you can make whole procedural worlds, and it even has 2D animation tools and a video editor. It really is a one-stop shop. But in this video, don't feel overwhelmed. We're only going to focus on texturing, lighting and rendering, and you'll be able to follow along. I do have screencast keys on, as you can see down here, so you'll be able to follow along with my keystrokes as well. Now, also for this tutorial we will need to get some more resources, so we'll need to download two materials which are also free and open source, and they are made by a organization called Polyhaven. They supply free open source textures, or CC0 as it's known. They also provide environments and 3D models. The first one that we're going to use is this plaster material, which we're going to use to texture our bricks, and then we're also going to use this concrete material which we will use for our mortar. We'll also download this HDRI map. Now an HDRI map is a kind of 360 degrees photograph that captures light data to help light our scene, and this is also available from Polyhaven. So everything you need is linked below. Now we will be using some of the more cutting edge features on Blender, so ensure you have Blender 4.3 or higher so you can follow along. Now we're also going to use a plugin that comes with Blender, but you do need to manually install it, so it is part of Blender. So if you go to edit up here and preferences, go to add-ons, type in node, and we want to check that node wrangler is activated. Okay, so that's just going to help us along, and when it comes to texturing it's pretty much mandatory, otherwise yeah, do everything and triple the time. Just quick note, both Blender Foundation and Polyhaven, as I said, are completely free and open source, so if you find any of these tools useful, please consider donating to them via their websites, but of course it's free and open source so you don't have to. Now as Matt mentioned in his video, both him and I are Plasticity affiliates, and you can use either of our affiliate codes for a 10% discount off any Plasticity license. Now if you want to use my code, it's Refuge10. Now if you're super brand new to Blender and you've never opened it up before, we'll just do a quick overview of the controls. Okay, so you can left click on an object to select it and click off the object to deselect it. If you want to rotate around your scene, you can hold down the middle mouse button and move your mouse. And same if you hold down shift and your middle mouse button, you can pan, and if you hold down control and your middle mouse button, you can zoom in and out, and you can also zoom in and out by scrolling your mouse wheel. Now there's two modes. There's object mode, which we're in now. If you press G for grab, you can grab an object and move it around. Okay, so this is looking at objects only. And if you press T on your keyboard, you've got these tools menus, and you can actually bring up little gizmos, like you can bring up this one for, you know, rotation and moving and scaling. So you can use the traditional ones, and you've got this gizmo that does a little bit of everything. So, but generally in Blender you'd stay in this mode and you press S to scale an object, G to grab it, and R to rotate. Okay, so these are the basic controls. Now we've also got another mode. If we go up here, we're in object mode at the moment, we've got edit mode, And if you've been using Plasticity, you know that you've got point mode, edge mode, and face mode. In Blender, that's called vertex mode, edge mode, and face mode. So in vertex mode, we can select individual vertices and we can move them around and manipulate them. In edge mode, we can take edges and move them around and manipulate them, and, you know, do different controls, like so. And then just like in Plasticity, we got face mode, and we can do things like that. So we do have similar controls to Plasticity, and that's great. So if you're used to that, then you might have some fun in Blender as well, using poly modeling as opposed to CAD modeling. That out of the side, let's get into the whole tutorial. Okay, so what we're going to first do is we're going to go back over. I'm just going to delete this cube, and we're going to go back over to Plasticity. So over in Plasticity, we want to export our cube. So just go up here and click export. Okay. I've already exported mine as Mario Block Collab, so if we click save on this, and we want to change this to n-gons, and you can pretty much leave everything else as a default, so you'll see these n-gons, and then hit OK. So coming back into Blender, to get our mesh in as an OBJ, we want to go to File, Import, Wavefront, and then it's got brackets OBJ. Okay, and we can go and find our object. Okay, and we've got our OBJ file here. Now I've got a pre-made operator preset for Plasticity import. You actually need to bring the scale to 0.01, I believe, and have the forward axis as Y and up axis as Z. Once you've got that set up, you can hit plus here and save a preset. So if we import our OBJ and we press N, which is a key, to bring up our N panel, we can come up to item, and we should have this scale here. This should be correct. Now, the other way that we can import the mesh, okay, is through the Plasticity plugin. Okay, so if we disconnect this, it should look like something like this, and then you can connect it. Okay, and we can hit refresh with Plasticity open. Okay, you have to set this up before. I've done another tutorial on this, so don't worry about it too much. Okay, and you can see that's coming at the exact same scale, and you want to hit it n-gon. Okay, so we want this one. We'll delete the one that we actually imported already, and we want to hit n-gon, and we're going to hit refacet, and then if we go up here and turn on our wireframe, so this one here, and turn on our wireframe, you should see that we've got this n-gon base mesh, very similar to the one that we exported, or actually probably identical to the one that we exported. So whichever way you want to do it is fine. Now very quickly, we'll just turn our wireframe off. So now we want to set up our scene. So with our camera and our ground and everything. So the first thing we're going to do is add the ground. So the first command we're going to do is Shift plus A, and this brings up a menu where you can add lots of different objects to your scene. Now we're going to go to Mesh Plane. Okay, and this is a 2 meter by 2 meter plane. Now that's more than enough. Now you can press to go into front mode, numpad 1, so 1 on your numpad. Or alternatively, you can hit this gizmo and you can toggle to different areas. So if you press this one that says -Y, you'll also go into front orthographic mode. Now you can see the plane is coming through the center of the object. So we're just going to press G, and then we're going to press Z to constrain it to our Z axis. And we're just going to bring it down to the bottom of this object, and just that should be pretty much good. Now, when you opened Blender for the first time, you should have had a default camera set up. Now, if you press 0 on your numpad, it will come in, and actually we're going to use this angle because it's the perfect angle for the render that we're going to do. But we do need to do a couple of things to get it looking a little bit better. The first thing we do, we've got the 16:9 ratio, 1080p. So if we come out to output here, we want to select both of these boxes, so you can click on one and drag down. Okay, and it's gone to 1920 by 1920. We'll make it a bit smaller than that. We'll make it 1300 by 1300, which is perfect for social media. Now you see if we scroll our mouse wheel, we're zooming in and out, and our scene is framed by the camera. But if we press N on our numpad and come up to View, you can find under View Lock, camera to view, and we can click on that and we can zoom right in on our object. Now remember, to pan we can press shift and the middle of the mouse button, and we just want to center this cube as best we can, and we want to give it a little bit of space on either side, maybe 20%, so something like that. But you'll notice if we zoom in like that, it starts to clip through the object. So that is actually in the camera settings, which if you come down here and click on the camera icon, okay, so that is the clip start. So it's set at 1 centimeter. This is a very small, or 10 centimeters even, so it's a very small object. So you can just grab this slider and drag it down, and that should fix the problem. Now I'm going to set this to around about this scale. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the focal length of the camera to 35mm. Okay, and then we can zoom in a bit again, so we've got like a little bit more perspective. Go into render mode. Okay, it's quite bright, our scene, and the scene that I've got, the world that I've got, is not that great. So the first thing I'm going to do is, it's a scene that was pre-set up before, so you might not have this. I'm going to delete the light from the scene from up over here, so I'm going to delete that. You can either delete something by pressing the X key and deleting it, or you can just press the delete button. Okay, so we've got our brick here, we've got our world, but our world is not the world that we want to use, so I'm just going to remove this world, and now we've got nothing. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to go into the surface and we want to make a background texture. Okay, and under the color we want to click on this, and we want to come over to the yellow dot. I'm going to come over to environment texture, and we're going to open up the HDRI that we brought in earlier. I can search for it because I know the name. It's Artist Workshop, and I've got the 4K version here. So now our scene is lit. If we just unlock our camera for a second, you can see that our scene is lit by this world environment. So if we press 0 again on our numpad, this environment, we're going to be doing more of a stylized photo or render. So we really want this background to be blurred. Now unfortunately Blender doesn't have a default way of blurring, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to blur our background. So we're going to go, at the moment we're in our layout workspace. Up across here you can see we've got lots of different workspaces. We're actually going to go into the shading workspace, okay, and we can lock our camera to the view there, and we want to go back into our rendered mode. By the way, if you're not already, put yourself in Cycles render mode, because that's what we're going to be using. And just a quick tip to save on some memory, you can see our VRAM down here, we're using 6.2 out of 8 gigs. We can press Control B, okay, well we've got our camera framed, and we can come across here, and now we've only got the part of our photo framed that we want to have framed. Now that's taken it down from 6 point something to 5 point something in terms of RAM, so you can clean up a bit of memory like that. Now we've got these workspaces here. Just quickly, we're going to set this up, so we'll drag this across, okay, just if you see that arrow thing, and we're going to come up to here and we're going to change this to a UV editor, right? And then if you come down here, you'll see a little cursor turn into a cross here, and now you can sort of move your workspaces around. What we want to do is we want to fill this one till it goes pale, so we've just got this area down here, and this is the workspace that we're going to be spending most of our time in. Over here you can see that we've got object, and we actually need to change this to world to do what we need to do with our world environment. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this one, and I'm going to go, so I accidentally deleted what we just made, so we're going to go back again, and we're going to go background, okay, color, and we're going to go the environment texture, and now we can actually open our environment texture from here. Okay, so a little bit of repetition, okay, and we're going to add our Artist Workshop back in. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to blur this. We're going to click on this, and we're going to press our Control plus T, Okay, that's the Node Wrangler add-on. If you didn't install Node Wrangler, you won't be able to do that, but this has added a texture coordinate node, which we'll talk more about later, and a mapping node. Now very quickly, I just want you to follow along with this. We're not going to explain anything here. So very quickly, we're going to just do a couple of things to make a blur effect on this world. So we're going to search here for a white noise texture, okay? And we're going to add it to this mapping node, okay? So you can see instantly we've got an effect, okay? But it's not really blurred, it's more like just showing us the white noise. So what we want to do then is we want to add a mix color node, okay? We'll be using a lot of these through this process today, okay? And we want to change the value here from mix to add. We want to Shift D to duplicate this node, and we want to change this one to subtract, which is over here, okay? We then want to add the vector of this into the A color of the mix color node, and we want to add the color of this into the B color node. We then want to add the result of the add node into the subtract node, okay? And then we want to add this into our vector, okay? And now we have a blurred version of that Artist Workshop material. So we're still getting all the lighting data that we were before, but we've got a blurred background, okay? And you can slightly alter this by messing around with this color value, right? But we'll leave it as it was. What we probably want to do is reduce the strength of our background down to something like 0.35, okay? Now, if we take over to our mapping node, okay, you can use the rotation value here to rotate our environment around. And I'm going to rotate this around to get a nicer effect of lighting on our brick to sort of expose a little bit more detail. Really, I want to bring this up to the Z, like say like 139, 140, something like that. Okay. And that's nice, but let's move this background light around to the left, something like that, okay? And we can actually quickly add a material to our, so if you come down here and you click on this material properties, and we can click a new material, and we can just change the color of this slightly just so we know that we've got this red brick. And you can see that the lighting there, we've got a light side and a dark side, and we've got the top there. And you can play around with this until you've got something that you like a little bit more. But I think what we just had there was quite nice. Okay, so what we're going to do now is add a 3-point light setup to our scene. So we're going to go Shift A, and we're going to come down here, and we're going to come down to light, and we're going to add a point light, and that's actually inside the cube, because if you see this cursor, this 3D cursor, it's in the 3D cursor. So if we just without clicking anything, press G, we'll be able to bring our light out like this, okay? And it's very, very bright. Okay, so we don't want it to be that bright, but we want to bring it a little bit to the left of this object, okay? And what we can do is we can take this color. First of all, we'll bring the watt down to 1 watt, okay? And then we're going to bring the color of the light, and we're going to give it a nice warm hue. Then we're going to press Shift D to duplicate that same light, and we're going to bring it to the other side, and we're going to take this and we're going to give it an opposite cool hue. Okay, so we're getting a cool light and a warm light. Now we're going to add another light, and this time it's going to be an area light, okay? And you can see that that's come to the same area, but you can press G, Z to bring it up. And if we just scroll out to our scene and we press 7 on our numpad to go into top mode, you can see that that light is massive. So the first thing we want to do is bring the scale of it right down. We can go back into our camera mode and see what that's done. And we can press G and press Shift Z, right, G and Shift Z, and that will constrain it to the X and Y axis only. So we can bring this light out like this, and then we can press R to rotate it, and you can press R again to sort of free rotate, okay? But we're just going to rotate it a little bit, G and Z, and this is what's going to be our rim light. So we're going to bring the power of this one down to like 1 or 2 as well. Just drag that up a little bit, and we can and we can rotate, and you can see that we're getting a nice hue on top of the object there like that. Okay, and we're going to give this also a nice cool hue. Alright, and later on when we render this, we'll see how we can get some nice effects from that. So this is the basic lighting setup that we're going to use. We might have to tweak them later on, but for now it's giving us a really good impression of our brick, and we can move on with our tutorial. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to UV unwrap our brick. Okay, now if we go into the UV editing workspace and we can press number 1 to zoom in on our brick, it should be already unwrapped. Now what you'll see that suddenly, and we can press the / key to isolate the object, so we're just working with this object here. What you'll see is that the way that Matt modeled this is he didn't use any chamfers. Well, he didn't use any fillets, he only used chamfers, which means everything got a hard edge. So when we imported our OBJ from Plasticity, it automatically marked all of these edges as sharp, which is why they've got these blue lines. Now we can use that to our advantage when unwrapping our model. So unwrapping the model, just to explain, imagine a flat cardboard box, right? We want to flatten the image, we want to flatten the coordinates of all of these bits of the object, the faces, onto a 2D space so we can add an image to them. Is pretty simple, and you'll see as we go along. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use these sharp edges to help define our seams, and the seams are what we use to unwrap our object. They're like cut marks in the object. So if I hover over this object and this face here in this convex area and press L, you'll notice that the whole object gets selected. But I've got this little box down here, and if we click on the arrow, it'll come up and it's set to seam mode. Now the reason it's selected the whole object is because we don't have any seams yet, but if we change this to sharp, we'll notice that we've only selected that face. And this is going to save us a lot of time, because it means that we won't have to select every edge around these things as these bricks as we go. So I can just rotate around my object by middle mouse dragging, and I can just press L over all of these mortar areas, or these areas where the concrete's going to go on all 6 sides, right? And then I can right click, okay, or we can go up to actually we go up to edge mode and we come down to mark seam. Okay, so now you can see that around there we've got all of these red lines, and these are the seams, but we have selected some of these edges here that we don't want. So what we can do is we can go up here from face mode into edge mode, and we can click these red lines that are connecting, and you can shift click to select more, and just scroll around the object and find all of the ones. There might be one on the top, and there might be one on the bottom. Yep, there is 2 on the bottom. And I just want one more rotation just to make sure that I got them all. Okay, and that's fine. So now we can right click and we can come down to clear seam. So what we can do now is we can, now that we've got these seams, we can now press L, and ensuring it's selected on seam mode now instead of sharp mode, we can just go around our object and we can select all of our bricks one by one, okay, without selecting the concrete areas. Okay, and when we've got them all selected, I think that's it, we can press U, we can press unwrap, and we're going to come down to minimum stretch. Okay, and that's going to put them all in there, and then we can actually up our iterations like this, and it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to get a nice layout here. Okay, now we can come down to UV here, and we just want to pack the islands. Okay, and it should think about it for a second, and when we pack the islands, we want to make sure that there's always a little bit of a gap. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now what we can do is come down to our material, the one that we already named. We can rename this brick, okay, and we can assign this material to these faces. Okay, so that's assigned. Now we just want to invert our selection by pressing Ctrl+I in our 3D viewport, but we want to go back because we want to be in face mode when we do it, and we want to press Ctrl+I. And now we've gone back and selected those original faces. We want to click this plus icon under our material. Okay, we want to add a new material, and we're going to call this one mortar. Okay, or you can call it concrete, and we can assign that. Now if we go back into our shading editor, right, and actually let's just have a look at it. We didn't unwrap these ones yet, so we'll unwrap them. Okay, and we'll go to minimum stretch as well, and we can also pack those. So where was it? Pack islands. Okay, it doesn't matter too much. This is just going to give us a little bit more space to work with. Now we've got that all done, and if we go back to our shading area, we'll see that we've got the concrete, and we can make that a little bit darker for now. Okay, we've got our brick and our concrete. So you could say that this is done, right? We could hit render, okay, and in a few seconds we'll have a render, and you've got a result. You could post that to Instagram and say, I did a render in Blender, but we're going to take it a lot further than that. So with our UV mapping that we just said, we can go back into object mode, and we can actually see what these materials look like. So they've just got this principled node plugged into the surface of the material output, and you can see those same features over here. Now one way that we would like to visualize our UV maps, okay, is if we choose this node and we press Control and T, we'll get this image texture. Okay, and if we go over here and we make a new texture, and we can come down here and we can do a UV grid, okay, on this, and we can call this UV checker. Okay, so this is a checker texture. Okay, it's both for checking your texture, and then we can take this image and we can take this UV, and you'll be able to see on this concrete material, we can see these squares. And if we go into our brick material and do the same and add that same material, you'll see that this 2D image is now wrapped around this 3D image. So we've got this thing, and this is one way of seeing how our textures work. Now if we just come out here and we go into texture mode, we can have a look at our model in a little bit more detail, and you will see that the way that we've unwrapped it, there is some level of stretching and warble on this, but for our purposes we don't need to worry about that too much. You can manually unwrap your seams in a much more efficient way to get less texture stretch, but because we're using slightly organic kind of materials, this isn't going to matter too much for us at this time. So with our brick material selected, okay, we've seen all of this. What we're going to do is we're going to select all of these, and we're going to click delete, and instead of pressing Control T, we're going to press Control Shift T, okay, and we're going to open up where we saved our textures that we got in, and now we can select all of these and we can press shift to hold down and select all of them, and then we can bring in the textures, and what it's going to do is it's going to automatically connect all of those textures that we brought in at the right scale. But look at this is quite harsh. So what we've done is we've imported a base color texture. We can have a look at that, a roughness texture, which you won't be able to see very much, but it's basically a black and white map, and that defines the roughness on the object. We've got a displacement texture, which has got a little bit of displacement, okay, which is using another black and white map to show crevices and high points. So white is high and the darker colors are like indentations, and a normal map which does a very similar thing, but on the 3D coordinates rather than 2D coordinates. Okay, So and by the way that I'm looking at these textures is I'm just pressing Control Shift and clicking the node, and it's previewing the textures for me. So we can go back to this, and this brick texture looks pretty ugly. Now, by default, Blender imports the scale of the displacement a little bit wrong. So 1 basically equals 1 meter. Okay, so we actually want to bring this displacement down to like 0.03, possibly lower, 0.02, and the same with the normal. We can scroll that down and bring that back a little bit, but it's still a little bit strong. So I think with this displacement, we'll bring it to like 0.003, and even maybe that's too for 0.002. Yeah, I think that's more like it. And with the normal, we'll leave that at like 1. Okay, so we've got this texture. It might be a little bit hard to see now, but on the top you can see some of the variations that are going on there. Okay, and then we want to do the same thing for our mortar or our concrete. So we're going to delete all of these, and we're going to press Control Shift T. We're going to navigate back to where our concrete was, and we're going to select all of them, and we're going to import them. And this one's come in quite nicely, but once again with the displacement 0.003 or lower, I think. And with the normal map, we can bring the strength down a little bit as well. Okay, and I think that looks okay for now, but we're going to take these textures quite a lot further. I mean, you could render this out a lot more. Now our ground plane is looking pretty bland right now, so let's make a new texture for that one. Okay, and let's just build up a ground plane texture. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a noise texture. Okay, alright, and we're going to Control Shift click that one, okay, to see what it does. And you might notice it's slightly black and white here, so we can bring up the scale. We'll bring the scale up to like 95, and you can see what's happening on the ground plane there. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to use these noise textures, these procedural noise textures. We're going to bring in another one called a Voronoi. Okay, and we're going to bring the scale of this one up to like 1000. Okay, we plug that in and see what's happening. We're getting these little dots. Okay, we're going to bring the roughness of this one up to like 98 or something, and the this lacunarity or whatever it is, you can bring this up to like, I don't know, maybe 20. Okay, and we're just having a little bit of a play around with this. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to blend these two together. So we're going to use our mix color again, like we did on our world texture, and we're just going to bring both of these into here. Okay, but actually we'll bring that one into the top, and we can bring the distance of this one into the color, and you'll see that we've got this mix, but we actually want to multiply them. Okay, so now we've got like a more complex texture. Okay, and we can bring that up like that, something like that. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to create a bump node. Okay, all right, and we want to plug the result of this multiply node into the normal of the bump node. Okay, and we want to put we want to plug it into the height, so we can just unplug that from there and plug that into the height. Okay, and then we want to take a new node which is called a color ramp. Okay, and what we want to do really is this color ramp, we plug this into here. Okay, and what you'll be able to see is if we start to pull this white in, we can sort of control what this color does. So, and what we want to then do, we've got the normal plugged into the normal, and we're going to plug this into the roughness. Okay, and now you can see our result. Okay, we're getting this crazy floor, and then we can control this a little bit. I'm going to bring our strength of our bump right down. Okay, we want to bring the metallic of our object up. Okay, and now we've got this cool metallic ground, and you can play around with this a little bit. I might just bring this back down to 0.5, and we've got this metallic looking ground here, which looks quite cool, to be honest. and we can play around with it. We can add a little bit of distortion to our ground and things like that. You can bring the roughness down, but we want this to be fairly shiny, and we can bring this metallic up. So just play around with this until you've got something that you're happy with. 0.05. Okay, let's just leave that for now, right? Play around with it as much as you like. Art direct it how you want it to be, and you could do any kind of floor you want. You could bring in another texture if you want. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, we've set up our floor, we've set up our lighting, we've set up our brick. We're now going to work on the brick material itself. So we'll click back on our brick, and we'll click on the brick material here. Okay, and we're now going to add some details to our brick. Now, one thing, if we zoom right in on here, is that these edges, these sharp edges that we had, they're infinitely sharp, and in the real world, and even in if you're trying to do something stylized, you do not want something that is infinitely sharp. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a bevel node. We could bevel this manually, or Matt could have done it in the other software, but we can actually do this through shaders, which is exactly what we're going to do, and this is going to help us later on with our edge wear. So we're going to, what I just did is I just searched for the bevel node. Okay, and if we zoom in on this, you'll notice it's got an input, and one of them is normals, right? So we want to plug the actual normal that we have into our bevel node, right? So if we look at our normal map, it actually looks like this. This is what our normal map looks like. And then now if we look at our bevel node, it's starting to look a little bit different and a little bit weird. And that's because of two reasons. Our bevel samples are very low. Okay, so we want to bring this up to like maybe, I don't know, 16. Okay, and also our bevel radius, this object's very small, so this is actually quite a high radius. But if we bring this right down to 0, you'll see like that. So we want 0 point, and we're gonna like maybe 4 zeros, 0.003. And now you'll notice once we plug that in, we've got a little bit of a bevel on there, so we might call that 0.004, or even maybe just 3 zeros. Oh, but it's not plugged into the normal, that's why we're not able to see it. Okay, so you're seeing that we're getting quite a round bevel, so we do need those extra zeros. So we'll go 0, 0, and that might be too many, so we'll stick with, excuse me. Alright, so now, yeah, you can see there now we've got a nice little bevel on these edges, and you'll be able to see in certain conditions that the light actually is giving it a small highlight there, and you'll be able to see it over there as well. So that is something that adds realism to your scene, so that's really cool. Now you'll notice that I've got the texture coordinates of UV here plugged into the mapping node. So that's because we're using our UV texture coordinates to drive, you know, this shape, or we can actually look at our red plaster shape. So this is, we're basically mapping this 2D image of this onto here, but we've got these other coordinates in the texture coordinate node. So just want to talk about that really quickly. So I'm going to go Shift D, and I'm going to duplicate this node. Okay, this is our mapping zone. And we're going to look at generated coordinates. So you might see this psychedelic color come up on your screen, okay? And it might be better to view this with a cube. So I'm just going to select everything for a second, and I'm going to press with a sphere. I'm going to press H, and I'm going to go Shift A, and I'm going to add in a UV sphere, and we're going to add our brick material to the UV sphere. And we'll just zoom out, and we'll go into front mode. Okay, so you got this psychedelic pattern. You're not having a flashback or anything. What this is generated coordinates, and it's an interpolation of red on the x-axis, green on the y-axis, and blue on the z-axis. So the actual axis correspond with the colors that are being interpolated, and we can visualize this by taking a separate color node, okay, and then we can get a combine color node, right? And we can see that when we've got the isolating just the red channel, okay, or the X channel, that we're getting from left to right a gradient of black through to absolute red. Okay, so this separate color node, so this combined color node, for example, has this slider from 0 to 1, and that represents an integer of 0 and a maximum integer of 255, meaning absolute red. And if we add different colors, we can, it's basically a color mixer, right? So if we add total green, we get total green. But by isolating these channels, what we can do is, if we just get rid of this combined color node, is we can actually use this with a color ramp. So let's say we can use a color ramp, okay, which is very artist friendly, and we can drive a black and white mask, okay, and by mixing this with other things, we can add things like dirt. So that's what we're going to do right now, okay. And the object coordinates, okay, work in a very similar way. So if we take this mask, but you'll notice that the gradient starts dead in the center, okay, and that is the center of the object. So if I take this object and I move in edit mode and I move it over there, you'll see that we're getting a similar effect, because now the center of the object is over here and the gradient starting from left to right. So if we bring that right to that point of the origin there, you'll see that we're getting a very similar effect to what we did. And with the object node, we could take another object, like let's just say, let's get a cube and put it over here, and we could choose this object here, and then if we move this object around, we can drive the mask with another object, which is really great for art directing. So I hope that made a lot of sense. What we'll do, we'll delete these two objects and we'll unhide everything, and we'll go back into our camera view. Okay, so you can see here that we've got this color ramp. Now what we want to do is we want to use the generated coordinates, okay, and we want to use the blue channel, so it's from bottom to top, so the blue channel matching the blue of the z-axis. Okay, so first of all, what we can do now is we can just press Control H on this node to hide everything that we're not using. We can do it for this one as well. Okay, it just makes it a little bit more easy to see what's going on, and we can do the same with this one too. All right, so we're just using the blue channel here. Okay, so with that being all said, I'm going to delete the separate color node, and I'm just going to bring another one outside of this mapping frame. So we're going to go separate color, and we're going to bring that in over here, and we're just going to plug the blue channel into there, and we're going to plug our generated coordinates into there. Okay, and just above this, we're going to create a noise texture. Okay, and we're going to add another color ramp into the factor into there. Okay, and then we can have a look at what this color ramp is doing, and we want this to be a dirt layer, so we can play around with our details. Okay, we can change the scale of this. We probably don't need to do much. We can up the detail a little bit, so if you zoom in, you can see what's going on. Okay, so we can up that detail to something, and we can up the roughness of this a little bit, so we're getting a little bit of a dirty look, and then we can use this color ramp here to pull in the details that we have. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to mix these two. So we've got our gradient and we've got our dirt, and we want to mix these two together into a mix node. Okay, a mix color node, that is, and we'll put the color of the noise texture into the top color output, and we'll put the color of the gradient into the bottom one. And now you can see we've kind of got like some ground dirt, which is less prominent at the top and more prominent at the bottom. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to add a kind of dirty color to this texture. So what we want to do is we want to add another node. We're going to add another color ramp, okay, and we're going to click on this black here, and we're going to just scroll this up, and we're just going to choose like a browny dirty color for this here, something like that. Okay, like I don't know, I've got something like that. That looks great to me. Okay, and then we do want to like control our roughness and our base color from this. So we'll use a multiply So a mix color with a multiply, and we can plug this into the bottom, okay, and we can plug our base color into the top. Okay, now you might not be able to see that just yet, but as we scroll this up, we can start to see the dirt coming on there, and you can play around with these sliders until you get something a little bit more prominent, so more of a gradient. But this isn't showing up too well right now. Okay, so what we can do is we can flip these to the other side of each other, okay, and then we can just dial this white channel here in, and you'll start to see that we're getting this dirt that's more prominent on the bottom. And then just mess with your scale until you've got something that you like. Play around with this as much as you like as well. Okay, so, and then you can use this to drive the gradient, and you can use the white to sort of make it sharper. Okay, so I think having the dirt reasonably covering the whole thing at the bottom, and then having a nice smooth gradient, so that looks okay. Now what we want to do is we want to plug this multiply into our base color, and you can see there we're getting a bit of an effect, okay, but what we also want to do is mix our roughness map in with the roughness over here. So this is starting to look a little bit crazy, so we'll take these two nodes and we'll put them over here. Okay, we'll put this node over here, and we can tidy things up a little bit by shift right clicking, and then you can grab these little nodes and you can G them around. So I can shift and right click and slice through that, okay, and I can just bring things down so that it's a little bit tidier and we can see what's going on. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take this texture here, which is our final texture, and we're going to make another color ramp with this one, okay, right, and plug that into the factor, and then we're just getting another black and white variation of that, which we can then take a mix color, okay, and we can plug this into the A factor of our mix color, actually into the B factor, okay, and then we can take our roughness map and we can plug that into the A factor. We'll make this a multiply, okay, and we can then plug this into our roughness over here and see how that looks. Okay, what we might want to do then is flip these around, okay, and you can start to see that the dirt is getting a different sort of roughness to the rest of the bricks. Okay, so we've kind of now got this, so we're getting this white value down there, and you can play with this as much as you need to until you get the effect that you're looking for. Okay, and you can dial these in by sort of making them closer together, okay, and you can flip them around to get different effects. So whether you want it to be wet or dry will be depending on which side that you have that on. So we've got that there like that, and it's looking quite nice, okay, and we can dial our dirt in more like that if we want to. Okay, so for now that's the dirt, and it's looking quite good, okay, and what we want to do now is we actually want to grab all of these nodes here, the ones that are our dirt node, and we want to press Control G, and that will isolate all these nodes into a group, and we can press N and it'll say name node group, and we can call this dirt. Okay, so our input, if we click in here and we can tab out, our input here is the A input is actually our base color, so we can rename this A1 to say base color so we know what goes in there, and our result is also going to go into our base color of our principled BSDF, so we can just make that there. So now that we've got this dirt node, okay, what we can do is we can press Control C, okay, and actually we'll tab back in the one, and the one that says color will say text chord. Okay, so we know our texture coordinates go in there, so we can that didn't work. That's because that's the wrong one. We want that one that we just named text chord to be actually roughness, and then this input one we want to be text chord. Okay, so we tab out of that so we know what goes into each socket. Okay, we've got this. Now we can press Control C. Okay, on that we can go to our mortar node and we can go Control V. Okay, we can just plug our generated coordinates into the text node. We can plug our base color into our base color. We can plug our base color into there. And actually we probably don't need to deal with the roughness on this concrete because that could be quite dry, but now you'll notice that the roughness or the dirt is also applying to the concrete. So now if we tab into here and we mess with one of our options, okay, we can do that, and we can mess around with it. It affects both the concrete and the bricks. So tabbing out of there, let's work on our brick texture again, and now we're gonna we'll drag this down here where it's supposed to go. We'll drag this down here, we'll just pull this up so we can see that it's going over to there. We can just make it nice and tidy, and now we're going to work on our edge wear node. So for our edge wear node, what we're going to use is we're going to use a different node called ambient occlusion. Okay, and if we just Control Shift click that, our ambient occlusion onto our bricks, you can kind of see what's happening here already. You can see that it's showing off different ambient occlusion areas. Okay, we can increase our samples to like 32 just to give it a bit higher quality. And if we take a color ramp, okay, and what we might want to do, just disconnect our displacement for a second. Okay, so what I did there is I control, and you got a little knife icon, right click drag, okay, and you get the disconnect the displacement. So we've not got any displacement on that right now. So what we've got here is this ambient occlusion. It's a little bit hard to see what's going on, but if we dial our color ramp in, you can start to see that it is, if we go only local, it will just do local areas, or if we do not only local, it will do the whole thing. So we want to do this a bit, and then what we want to do is we're going to dial this in somehow. Okay, and you can see as we drag this up, we're getting more dark areas on the insides and lighter areas on the outsides. So what we can do then is we can use this to drive an edge wear. So let's take a noise texture, okay, and I hope you're all following along. I might be going a little bit quickly, but I'm trying to explain everything as I go along. This is the kind of stuff where a lot of repetition will help you out. So we've got our noise texture and our color ramp here. So what we'll do is we'll take a mix color again. I told you we're going to be using this node a lot, and we'll plug our factor of our noise texture into the top socket and the color ramp into the bottom socket. Okay, and we'll plug that in, and you might not see a lot happening there, but you can see a little bit of noise. Now if we bring our black all the way up over here and our white all the way up over here, and we make another one and we pull that in between them two and we make that one black, okay, what we should be able to do is dial this in. Okay, what we also want to do is plug our normal, and actually we want to duplicate this normal map here because we want to use a different strength. Okay, I'm going to plug that there, and what we can do is we can take our normal, and we've got our normal there, we can click Alt on that and we can just drag with our right click and just link that up there like that. So that's all done, and let's just tidy this up as we go because it's starting to be a little bit messy. Okay, but we can see that that's coming up there. So we want to plug our normal into our ambient occlusion node, and we want to bring the strength up a little bit, and we want this plugged into our thingo. We can bring the scale of our noise up to about 100, I would say. Alright, so we've got this nice crackly noise. We can bring the roughness up and the detail up, and maybe a little bit of distortion as well. Okay, so what we really want to be doing, we need to change, I think, this to multiply and turn our factor right up, and you'll see everything's gone black, but you might notice a couple of white speckles. Maybe you can't see it with the YouTube, but as we bring this down, we bring this around, we're starting to see that we're getting these cracks, and also the normal is driving these cracks as well. Okay, so if we just play around with this a little bit, and then we plug our multiply into our base color. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's wrong. So if we take another mix color node, okay, and we plug our edgeware result into the B socket, and the base color coming out of our dirt node into this socket, what you'll start to notice is that there's a very small amount of edgeware around these edges of the brick. Now if we plug this into our base color, and there, you can't really see it yet, but what we'll do is we'll just play with this until we get a stronger effect. Okay, and we may also, there we go, we're starting to get a bit of a stronger effect. And what we could also do is see how our displacement works instead of our normal. Doesn't do much, so we'll undo that, and we can just bring the strength up quite high on the normal. Okay, so we're getting these little pockets and sockets. Okay, and then we want to get another color ramp, okay, out of our multiply node. All right, and we can drive the color of this edgeware node by fine-tuning some of the colors. So we'll add a plus in there, and we'll just drag this down, and we'll just give it a bit of a color that matches our brick. Maybe we can even sample a color from our brick, like this pale color here, and we can bring our white socket right down, and then we can just fine-tune this. Maybe bring our normal strength down to about 3. Okay, and we've got our edgeware, and then we can also get this, and we can help drive our roughness from it as well. So we want this to be quite of a rough effect on the top of that as well. So I mean, you can do that, but I think for our purposes, if we look at our camera view again, okay, we're getting a nice little edgeware on that. So feel free to fine tune that as much as you want. Now a good way to art direct this is by using the black and white color ramp. Okay, and we can just pull this around until we get something that, you know, you can really see where the edgeware is going to lie. Now other things that you can do is you can mess around with your other nodes, like your bevel node and things like that, to see how that affects it. Okay, but as we pull these nodes around, we can see that this is getting this effect here. The strength of the normal map will affect it as well. And I think if we bring that down to about 1.5, if we've got the set on 1, okay. Now if we come back down to our bevel node and bring our radius down a little bit, you'll notice that might have an effect on it as well. And if you reduce the samples, that might also have an effect on it. But I think at this stage, let's just delete this socket here, we don't need that anymore, and we can just I think this edgeware is looking quite nice. It's a little bit hard to see, so what we can do is we can use this to also maybe drive a little bit of the displacement. So if we get like a bump node plugged into the height, okay, we can then see how this affects our displacement map, okay, and use that as our displacement instead. Okay, bring our strength down, or we can plug it into our normal and see how that affects it. Okay, and the other thing that we can do is we can actually play around with our noise texture here. Okay, so we can I don't know, play around with the roughness of it and things like that. So have a fiddle with that, but we are getting some extra details there. Okay, so I think that looks quite good. So we've got a bit of edge wear on there. You can play around with that as much as you like, but for the last part, this is more or less done. One thing that you may wish to do is play around with your lights a final time to get your final lighting set up. Okay, we can make this light, we can click on our light and we can make this even smaller. So we go like 0.001. Okay, so it's tiny. And you might, it's quite bright, so we bring this down to like 1 watt maybe. And we bring it around to the back a little bit. Okay, in our world environment, 0.35, we can bring that even down to 0.25. We've got everything that we need. We want to render this out. So there are render settings. So if you first go to render, obviously we've been in cycles this whole time. Okay. We want it on GPU compute if you've got it, otherwise it'll be CPU compute, it'll take a little bit longer. Denoise settings you can set to optics if you're on a NVIDIA GPU or whatever's relevant to your GPU, or you can set it to under render, under denoise. I've got it set to open image denoise, which makes a bit of a different denoising. Click use GPU, come down to color management, okay, and we can just scroll down here. You can actually drag these up and down if you like. And we've got AGX, and we can change the look to like, say, punchy or high contrast, something like that. I might stick it to punchy for now. I might just look at my other lights here. So like the point light 1, we'll just move this around. And we're getting this nice warm glow coming from the left. Point light 2. I'm just going to move this around a little bit as well. And we've got this other light coming there like that. Okay, so they are getting a little bit blown out though, so we can just move these around a little bit. And one thing that we can do, we can go back to our brick material, and one thing that I would like to do before the dirt node is search for we just type in HS and you get a hue saturation value, and you can kind of direct your brick a little bit. So we can up the saturation. Okay, and get more of a punchy color. Okay, you can play with the hue if you want, get different colored bricks, and the value. So I might bring the value down a little bit, which is like the lightness. Okay, and if we zoom in on that, I'm not too happy with the color of this ground plane. I might keep the metallic up, but if we just look at this ground plane, let's just make it a little bit less rough, or a little bit more rough with that reflection in there. I think that reflection looks quite nice actually, but it does look a little bit like water, so I might just bring this white value down a little bit. Oh sorry, I might bring this black value up a little bit, and that just makes it a little bit less rough. And with our noise texture, maybe we'll make this like 1,000, see what happens. Okay, maybe not, maybe like 200. Okay, and the displacement of that, which is our bump, will bring the strength down quite a lot. Okay, like that. So we've got this very subtle effect. Okay, and then we can bring our roughness down. I think that looks okay. Okay, top of the brick is not being lit very well, so maybe we can just bring up our world environment back again, 0.35. This is just like the final steps, like it always takes ages. Like your final 10% is always going to take a long time. So what we might actually do, okay, because I like how this light is hitting this, okay, and I don't like how bright it is, so we'll click on the light. I want it to be a little bit brighter than that, so we'll go like 1.5, okay, and then, but I don't like this color coming here. I don't want that light to be affecting. I just want this to be kind of like a highlight or a rim light, as it's called in the industry. We can bring it down a little bit or up a little bit, something like that. And then what we can do is we can come down to this tab with this light selected, come down to, where is it, shading, light linking, new, okay, and then we can just take our box, right, and we can drag this into this here, and you'll notice now the light is not affecting the floor. So if I undo that, we've got this big background on the floor, and if I redo that, but it's still affecting the object, so we're only affecting the object with the light there. So that's kind of cool. And just making sure our world settings are set, I don't know, 0.25? Yeah, I think that's quite nice. Okay. Another thing is, if you don't like this floor at all, you can actually just make this plain visibility. You can make it a shadow catcher, and then it'll just sort of like reflect the environment, and that's one way of doing things as well. But I think what we've got here is great. So we could also just go back to our world settings here, and we could just rotate the world settings and see what kind of reflections we get from the world. I think that's starting to look quite cool. We're just pulling it around. And 0.35. Yeah, okay. So I'm pretty happy with that. We could maybe just increase the scale of this light a little bit more. Make it a little bit bigger. And reduce the blueness of it. And just reduce the brightness a little bit like that. Okay. And there's all sorts of other things you can do with lights. You can add gradients and all sorts. So now that we've got our scene art directed, okay, I mean, you can play around with your settings till you go blue in the face. Like this last step of the process, this isn't exactly how I would want it, but for the sake of time, you spend as much time as you want art directing this, right? So, but for the sake of time, we're just going to go and render this. So in our render settings, it's cycles under... We want to have denoise activated, okay, and the max samples I've got there 128. We'll just bump that up for our final render to like something like 200. Okay, if we come down to lights, we can turn light tree off, because that's only really going to have a good effect if you've got a lot of lights in your scene. We've got our color management set to RGB, transform AGX. You can go through these and you can find different kind of effects, okay, right? So if you are doing like something for movies and stuff, you probably put it out as a raw image or filmic log or something like that, but we want to use AGX just for the sake of this render, and we want to set it to punchy, okay. In terms of these settings, we've got 1300, okay. We want it to come out as a PNG, okay. If you want more high dynamic range, you can use an EXR, okay. Color depth we'll set to 16 for the sake of this. And one more thing that we want to do in the view layer tab, okay, we've got all these data. These are different like passes that you can do out, like a mist pass. You can control like mist and distance and things like that. What we want to do is come down to crypto matte, and we want to do object crypto matte, and what this is going to do is set up our like a mask that we can use to control the colors and brightness of the different like objects in our scene, so like our ground and our brick and everything. And one thing that we should have done earlier on, right near the beginning, add a little bit of depth of field to our camera. So we'll click on our camera. Okay, we're going to sort of we're going to shift and right click this corner of the object, and we're going to press Shift A, and we're going to add an empty plane axes. If you come down to this data for the axis settings, we can make this a little bit smaller. Okay, then we're going to click on our camera, and we're going to click on this camera icon down here under this menu, and we're going to turn on depth of field, and whoa, is it blowing out. Now we're going to focus on, use this eye picker, our empty object, okay, and because this object that Matt made is really small, so this is going to be almost like macro photography, okay, we're going to bring our f-stop of our camera right up to like about 20, okay, or maybe a little bit lower depending on how much blur you want, okay. And the thing is those crypto matte masks that we activated before are going to honor the depth of field. So now what we can do is, I think I quite like that. We can add some blades to this, okay, to our camera. So like 9 blades would be like quite a high quality camera. And if you want a really film type effect, you can do a ratio of 2, but this won't really affect much in the way of anything right now. Now we can hit F12 to render. If you want your render to go faster, click on wireframe mode, because it's just going to free up some VRAM for you. Okay, and we'll render that. That should take about 2 minutes on my computer. Might be longer or quicker on yours. So there we have it. We've got our render of our Mario brick, our Super Mario brick, but the next step is compositing. Now, a lot of people would go into Photoshop or Lightroom or some other software to do this, but we can do this all within Blender as well. So what we want to do is we want to go over to our compositing tab, okay, and we want to like edit this a little bit as well. So we come down here with our crosshairs, drag down, get rid of this, and then we can bring across a new one, okay, and we're going to change this to image editor, and we're going to, from our list, you can type REN and you can find your render result, and we've got our render result here. Now we want to click use nodes over here, and now we have our composite. Okay, so we can see the result of our composite over here, or our render. This is our image or our render result. And what we can do now is those crypto matte passes that we did, so we can bring in a crypto matte node, okay, a mask crypto matte. And what we want to do is we want to click on a plus icon here, and you'll get an eyedropper. And now if we hover over our plane, we see that we've got our plane, and if we hover over our box, we can see we've got our box. So if I click on the box, it's now in this mask. Okay, so we can then take our crypto object into the image over there. Okay, and what we can do is we can now edit just that, and see this depth of field that we've created is going to be honored by this crypto matte mask. So crypto mattes is the industry standard. It's what they use in all the top softwares. So I'd get used to using these masks, especially if you're going to be using things like motion blur and depth of field. Use these masks because they're going to make your life a heck of a lot easier. So it's something that took me years to figure out. And so now if we just take, let's say, a RGB curves node, okay, and what we can do is we can plug our factor, or so our matte, into the factor of our RGB curves node, and our image into the image socket of our RGB code, and plug the image into there. We can now edit just the brick without affecting the floor. So we can, and what we're going to do is we're just going to slightly bring this one down here, right? And we're just going to bring this one up here, and we're going to make a very slight S curve to kind of art direct that a little bit more. Okay, so we want to, as I bring this down, you can see I can get some more detail over there. So I'll bring that down a little bit. Okay, so we got our dirty brick. Okay, so that's cool, we've done that. Okay, we can bring our composite over here a little bit more. Okay, let's just bring this all the way over here. Okay, so we've got a little bit more space to work with. Okay, so we can, as per usual, we can just tidy this up a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to tidy this so we can see where everything's going. Okay, and then we can take another crypto object, okay, and we can just type in crypto matte image, okay, and we're going to select our plane, okay, and we're going to do the same. We'll take another RGB curves node, okay, or actually we could just take a hue saturation node for this one. Okay, just keep it simple. Okay, plug this one into the composite. Actually what we need to do is plug our factor into there, and then plug the image of this into here. Okay, and we can just bring our saturation down on that, and you can make it go black and white. You can put the saturation up, so we can pop our saturation up to give a little bit more color to our reflections, but then bring the value down so it's just a little bit darker, so our cube is nicely popping out there. Okay, so now we've got those two. We can just mix them together with a mix color node. Okay, right, this is like, we're just doing a really basic render here. So you can bring the factor down, and we've got that. And then you can just sort of art direct this as much as you like. So you can bring this, you can change the hue of the floor, you can make it a little bit more psychedelic if you wanted, like, you know, there's a bit of a pink floor, but I'm just going to leave it at those kind of values there. I'm thinking this looks quite nice so far. Then what we can do, we can start to edit our image a little bit better, or get some more effects on here. So what we'll do is we'll take a lens distortion node, okay, and we're just gonna, you can hold down shift, by the way, so if I pull this up really quickly, it's gonna go whoa. So if you hold down shift, you can do a nice slow transition. So we're gonna make this a little bit distorted, so it's popping in, and we're gonna make it to fit there, okay. There's other modes you can do, project, and you can change the dispersion and things like that, but I'm going to do fit with a little bit of, I think that might be too much, okay. So this is starting to look kind of cool, okay. Then we're going to add some lighting effects, so we're going to add a glare node, okay. And what we can do, it's automatically set to streaks, but you can take it down and you can add bloom like that, and it's way blown out. So you want to bring your threshold up a little bit, okay, and we're getting this nice kind of like foggy bloom effect. We've also got fog glow, so if you want to use that, you can use that as an alternative to bloom, but I think I like the bloom that we're getting here. And what you can then do is you can add a you can actually just have a play around. You can look at your, like, these different filters, right? So you could pixelate this, okay, and make a pixelated Mario brick, okay. So do something like that, but it's by the by. I'm not going to use a pixelate node, I'm going to just use that. Now, a really cool effect that we can do right after our mix node is we can add in a filter, Kuwahara node, okay, and you'll see that we're getting this like non-photo real effect. So we can bring this down to like 2.5 or something, and we're just getting this cool stylized effect on the floor and on this, okay. You can change it up to high precision, you can mess around with these, okay, but I think I'm just going to leave it on classic, and we'll just call that 3, okay. And you could also put your glare node before that, so if we just wanted to cut that out and put your glare node in before that and then add your image, you get a little bit of this stylized effect on the glare there, and that's about it. Like, you can then go image, save a copy, and plug this out for your render, okay, and we'll do just that. Now, that's about the end of the tutorial. Thank you so much for sticking with it. Thanks to Matt for reaching out and wanting to do a collab, and I hope you learnt something. I know that I did, like teaching this. I hadn't used some of these phrases out loud in my life before, so look, like, subscribe, there's a lot more content coming, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Tschüss.